think there's a few things going on. First, the Conservatives have obviously committed to this carbon tax farce, as I'm calling it. Have been pressing it really heavily in the House. 60 MPs now have used the phrase carbon tax in the House in just 3 weeks. But along with that, you're seeing what was an interesting report, I think, earlier this week, which said that there was some dissension, I guess, within the ranks that Conservative MPs were getting a little bit frustrated with being seen as pawns of the PMO. And now you've got the NDP standing up in the House and publicly shaming Conservative backbenchers about the fact that they're standing up and reading these talking points in the House. I'm not quite sure where all of this is headed, but these three things seem to kind of all connect at some point. And it seems to be adding a little bit of pressure to the system. And conceivably that pressure is going to break at some point. And how it's going to break and where it's going to break, we don't know. But I think it's something really interesting to follow as we go further into the fall.
I'm increasingly fascinated by the gap between the sort of busy majority agenda that Stephen Harper said he was going to set and what we're seeing, which is sort of flotsam and jetsam getting sucked into the headlines. Rob Anders made headlines twice in a week with controversial statements, at best controversial, at worst dumb. And the plan that Vic Taves has to fire prison chaplains who happen to be non-Christian because they are part-time prison chaplains, and hang on to all the Christian chaplains who happen to be full-time. To me, that's an indicator of some serious drift in the public messaging of this government. No one knows what this government is here to do. Now, there's probably a segment of the Conservative market that is pretty happy with whatever Rob Anders has to say and is pretty happy with firing non-Christian prison chaplains. But Stephen Harper himself frames his government as a serious government in a time of global economic crisis. I suspect the agenda is much more the things that are not being announced or that in fact being carefully hidden from public scrutiny. The various departmental cuts that the Parliamentary Budget Officer, Kevin Page, has been desperately trying to get evidence of and records of from government departments, and he's been stonewalled. I suspect that's the real government agenda, is a progressive reshaping of the mission and action of the federal government. And in the nature of it, it's so controversial that it has to happen behind closed doors. But in the meantime, it's kind of one wacky headline after another here on the Hill.
Minister Flaherty gave us a little preview of the themes he's taking into the IMF meetings this week, and he talked about worries about gridlock in the US over fiscal matters and inaction in Europe. It's not the first time we've heard him on these themes. He's been really scolding Canada's sort of economic partners pretty consistently for more than a year now. His visit to the IMF is the first big international meeting Canada will participate in since John Baird, the foreign minister, went down to the UN, where he scolded the UN about its lack of action on important files mostly having to do with the Middle East. This tone of Canada taking a kind of hectoring attitude into international forums is, I think, starting to get problematic. You can do it once or twice, but at some point, a power like Canada, a middle power, seen by many people as a sort of minor player, has to seem more constructive and less lecturing. And what I think we should watch for from Minister Flaherty is whether or not he's able to find a way to leverage the good reputation Canada has on stuff like banking regulation, deficit control, the things that we like to think of as part of the Canadian economic brand now, whether he can leverage those points into something that sounds constructive and helpful instead of just a continuous kind of reminding of our partners on the world stage about their own shortcomings. It really isn't a stance that's going to win Canada a lot of friends and get us a lot of credibility. Ultimately, I think it grows tiresome, and the government should be careful to think about hitting a different kind of tone this week and probably for the rest of this term of our government. They really need another way of communicating with the world.